This is Larry, W6WUH in California. I'm actually stopping in the middle of this project just to run over the minimum tools and kind of workspace you need to have to make up a ham radio cable like this. If I'm smart, I'll put this at the very beginning of the video. So the first thing you need is a solid, clean workspace. I've got my Workbench full of radios and other junk, so the actual space I'm using here is about 2.5 feet deep and 2.5 or 3 feet wide. So if you've got a kitchen table, if you've got a desk in your bedroom, you can accomplish this. You just have to have a certain amount of elbow room, and it has to be solid enough to work on. So what tools are minimum to do this job? Above and beyond the schematic and the table that you've made out of the schematic to do your wiring with, you need some basic hand tools. And so let's take a look at what I've got here. I've got a good pair of needle nose pliers. These happen to be Exolite, which I really like. Can you get along with a pair from Harbor Freight? Probably. There's lots of different kinds of needle nose, and they go from fine and thin to pretty sturdy, and this is really probably a pair of jeweler's pliers with a really rounded nose in between. This is the preferred tool for this. Could I do it with this? Probably, but with a little more difficulty. So you've got to have one pair of needle nose. That's a must. Next thing you have to have is a pair of wire strippers. There's really only two acceptable kinds. The expensive spring-loaded sharp die kind that are used in avionics and commercial work, which most of us don't have, but they are available mail order from places like Antique Electronic Supply, I think. This is a pair of electrician's wire strippers. They're American-made, they're generic, and they're very good. These are made by Gardner Bender Company. If you've got a Lowe's or Home Depot near you, or a good Ace Hardware store that sells electrical stuff, they're going to sell this tool. Notice that the jaws are marked for wire gauge, and these go from number 20 all the way up to number 10. These have good, sharp, precision jaws. They will trim this wire perfectly each time, and without nicking the conductors or doing any damage. So you have to have those. Do not try to do this with a pocket knife or your teeth or anything else. If you look at these, you'll see that they're all trimmed to the same length very cleanly, and that's what you want. Ballpoint pen. You need several of these markers if you can get them. I've got them in red, green, and black, and you can see that I've marked my cables, color-coded them, and marked them with those markers. A very handy thing to have. A utility knife or a razor blade, either one, to carefully trim the insulation on these cables. You don't want to nick the wires inside, but I use this because it's not quite as sharp as the razor blade. Bent the thing back, and it drew a line with a pen, bent it back, and just scored it with that, and then physically broke it open and cut, being careful not to nick the inside stuff. A couple of screwdrivers. Use what you got. If you've got an Ace Hardware store, go buy some Enders screwdrivers with hardened tips. They're very good. Buy Craftsman screwdrivers. They're very good. These are actually, well, let's see. This is an Enders, which I really like. Sometimes you find them with clear and gray handles, sometimes with black, but they're a good hardened tip screwdriver with precise tips. This is actually a Home Depot screwdriver. Not as good, but adequate. So there you go. Some colored tape. That was very important in this case. If you can send away and get cable numbering tape, do it. One of the electronic supply places, DigiKey, Mouser, Antique Electronic Supply, whoever you get it from, maybe even Radio Shack, get the cable numbers. I didn't have them, so I had to resort to color coding. This is colored electrical tape, good American stuff. I think this is all Scotch. I bought some Chinese crap, won't stick, not worth a hoot, flimsy, forget about it. You can buy this the same place you buy the Gardner Bender wire cutters. Another thing you're going to need are a good pair of regular wire cutters. Depending on what size work you're doing, you may need a fine pair like these, or you may need a heavy pair. I can't put my hands on it right now. Here we go. That's a crescent or an exolite. To cut the ends of these cables, I actually had all these wires together, trimmed them off all square and exactly the right length, and that's the tool I used to do it. And lastly, you got to have a good soldering iron. Are you going to do a job like this with a soldering gun? No way in hell. You've got to have a good soldering iron. This is an old Weller soldering station I bought, at a ham flea market, but it is controlled temperature. You want to have a good wet sponge. You want to know how to tin your tip so that you've got a good clean tip, and you want to have some good rosin core solder. Small diameter like this is actually ideal. You don't need great big heavy stuff. I'm happy to be using some that's heavier because I like the kind of rosin that it has in it better. 60-40 tin lead solder is ideal if you can get it. That's what we're using here. This is some old stuff. I bought a bunch of rolls of this used somewhere. But it's good. I don't know anything about the lead-free solder, and I wouldn't use it. So there you go.